Hey there, Stoane here with Wood and Stone. Today I want to chat about how to do flat glue-ups. This is a thing that I get in a lot of my cutting board classes. People have come in, they bought a cutting board kit, and they glued up U-shaped cutting, not U-shaped, but it's got a nice curve to it, and they're a little confused about how that's happening. So I just want to go over some of the things that go into a flat glue-up because it's such a pertinent piece of woodworking. This basic concept of learning how to do this is crucial. I would say I use this every time that I'm in the wood shop. I am using this concept for all of my glue-ups. This is how the same thing that applies to flat glue-ups also applies to clamping things up square or not having miters that slip when I clamp those up. All these things go together. So once you understand this, you can kind of start to build into other things. So the first thing that I want to get into is the style of clamp and whether it's a light duty, medium duty, or heavy duty are going to play a role in this. And the reason why is the bar on the spine of the clamp bends. And when it bends, that's what will cause your piece to, so if this is bending this way, that's going to pull both of your ends up that way. So that creates the U shape or odd shapes that a lot of people are coming up with. And when you see, a lot of people don't notice this until it gets pointed out, then it's really obvious. But this bar is the biggest difference between light duty, heavy duty, and medium duty clamps. And the reason is obviously more steel costs more money, but the heavier that is, the less likely it is to bend. So I'm just gonna plop this on this log so you can see when I clamp this up, we are pretty flat. And then if I really reef on this, you will see it start to take a turn. You can see how that clamp has bent. So two pieces here. Having a heavier duty clamp helps with that. Also, not over clamping. So what we're trying to do is we want to get enough pressure to get glue squeeze out, but not so much that we start to get this curve in there. And a piece of getting that glue squeeze out proper is we want to do a little bit of a rub. We don't want a lot of extra glue in that joint because the hydraulic pressure creates a lot of variables. You get slippage with your wood, and you also get it doesn't actually go tight. That happens. And the other thing is that there's just more material in between the two pieces of wood that causes it to want to shift while you're clamping it up, which leads to inaccurate glue ups. So a couple different things. This is a main problem that everybody is dealing with, that and too much glue in the joint. Those are the two things. So those little rollers from the silicone rollers that I get from WoodRiver, Woodcraft, WoodRiver is a brand. But those are really helpful in helping you get the correct amount of glue on the joint. That's less of a problem as in comparison to this clamp up. So not over clamping, getting that enough pressure in there to get a tight joint, but not create the U. But sometimes you can't avoid it because you have really heavy duty lumber that's a little bit warped, or you are fighting some other factors that are going into this. So what do we do to counteract that? So I'm gonna pull this off because I just wanted to show you this concept here. Now that we understand what's going on, we're gonna set this aside, and I'm gonna dry clamp up a cutting board. I have some scraps around. This isn't gonna end up being a cutting board, but a couple of things that we do here. So we want to, first of all, make sure that we have pretty close, clean edges so that when they go together, it doesn't take a lot to pull those into place. The other thing that we want to do when we clamp these up, instead of clamping it like this, clamp it like this on its side. So that way when it starts to curve, it's starting to pull it back this way, right? Because when that curves like this, it's going to pull these pieces back this way. It's another thing that you can use. Once you start to understand how the clamps are working, you can actually use the clamps to move the pieces the way that you want to move. So if I want to pull it this way, flip the clamp this way, tighten it down, you'll see those pieces start to slide back. If I want it to go that way, you can do the other. The other piece here that we'll do, so we'll put one here, and then we'll put one on the bottom side to counteract the ones on the top. So when you're doing like a large, so this is how you get this so that it lays out flat. When you're doing a large tabletop, it's the same concept. One on the top, one on the bottom, one on the top, one on the bottom. It's not, wood is a natural thing, so it's not one of these, every time that you have one on the top, you have to have one on the bottom. Sometimes that wood wants to really fight moving up one way or the other. So sometimes you'll have to do a couple on the bottom and then a couple on the top to counteract. It depends on what the wood is trying to do. And this is where the art part comes into the artisan of this, because it's not well, you need 3 clamps with 1 on the bottom and 2 on the top all the time. It's a basic concept that you have to learn through experience how to clamp these together and work with the wood to make it do what you want it to do without over forcing it so that it then kind of overdoes it and creates the problems that a lot are getting with these uneven glue joints. The next 2 tools that I'll use to get a nice flat glue up, this is a non-marring hammer. So we have a harder plastic on this side and rubber on this side. I use this all the time. This is a go-to tool right next to tape measure and a square. This is the next tool, and this is what I use it for, is to beat these pieces. It's a lot easier on your palm of your hand, but that rubber edge doesn't make a dent like a metal hammer would. The other thing you can do if you only have a metal hammer is you can get a separate block of wood so that you're denting that block of wood instead of the wood that you're hitting, trying to get into place. So I'm tapping these into place so that they're nice and flat. They don't have to be perfect, because after you did it, if this was your cutting board, this would then go through a planer or a joiner to get everything nice and flat. But the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take a combo square and I'm going to put that across the edge and make sure I'm not seeing a bunch of daylight. What you don't want to see is daylight over here and touching in the center, or touching on the ends and daylight in the center. That's what creates your shape, right? And because you check on one end does not mean that the other end is that way. So I would check at least at every clamp to make sure that you have that correct. Because as you work your way down the wood being a natural product, maybe a knot's giving it a little bit more tension in one spot than the other, so you have to put a couple extra clamps there to get it to do what you want. Same thing goes with everything being nice and flat. With your combo square, when you're checking it, check multiple spots along the way. That way you can see kind of how things are working out. And this is, again, it is the art part of this craft. You know, there's a lot of it that's very, a right angle is 90 degrees and it's never going to be anything other than 90 degrees. Some of this stuff is touch and feel, for lack of a better way to put it. It's art. It's the artisan part of this. So you have to get experience in the shop creating sawdust to learn what's the correct amount of tension. Classes can help with that, because you have a experienced person that will show you what the correct amount of tension is on the project that you're doing in the class, and on that particular piece of wood and species of wood. But the best way to learn how to do this is go out in your shop with some scraps, get them set up, and then start dry clamping them together. Dry clamping means doing it without glue. And then once you get comfortable with that, do it with glue, because with glue comes the time, the open time. Now you're on the clock until it starts to set up, and it's more permanent. So if you get it wrong, you have to cut it apart in order to try again. So those are my pointers for beginning to make flat glue ups, and glue ups that are nice and square and the miters aren't slipping. It's the same thing. A lot of it comes down to over clamping and not having clamps that are counteracting what the first clamp is trying to accomplish. So the first clamp is pulling that thing together, but it's also warping it. So you need another clamp to then pull it back into place. So there's just a little bit more complication of this, and the best way to do it is take everything that I just told you, get in the shop, start making sawdust and practicing. I hope that helps you out. If it did, please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you next time.